You're listening to the Talking Air Filtration podcast, where you get to know the people that make air filtration possible and help us all breathe easier. Because clean air matters.
We'll get insights from air filtration professionals and learn how they became successful in their careers. Along the way, we will discuss best practices, guidelines, trends, and challenges in air filtration in a variety of applications. We hope HVAC, air filtration, and indoor air quality pros, including business development, engineering, building owners, and facilities management, will enjoy the insights our guests will bring to this podcast.
I'm Brandon with American Metal Filter. About 15 years experience in the industry, and I've been with NAFA about 14 of those years. I'm glad to be here. And next I have Norm, and go ahead, Norm.
My name is Norman Rodriques. I'm the president of Springfield Spring and Stamping. Best part about this with this podium is I don't have to stand on a box, which I normally do. So this works out pretty well. A lot of people in this room already know my company as Springfield Spring Corporation. We've been manufacturing engineered air filter holding frame clips for almost 30 years. I actually got my start from Flanders filters. About 30 years ago, the guy's name was Phil Jones. He was a purchasing manager at Flanders, and I was there actually on a 4-slide stamping part. And he saw some of the metal components we made, and he held up this thing, and he said, "Norm, can you make this?" I said, "What the hell is that, Phil?" He goes, "It's a P-clip." I thought to myself, why would people urine on a clip? Just didn't make sense. But he said, "Norm, these P-clips have the shape of a P, and they are used ubiquitously for an air filter holding frame." So that, one of his key objectives for asking me that was because the quality of what was out in the field was not the quality that he wanted and he was buying. So that is kind of how I got my feet wet. I then realized that Camphil was the grand poobah of developing these clips and for their Type 8 holding frames. So I went ahead and reverse engineered all of their clips. We then integrated into that a lot of quality. So collectively, we were able to produce clips consistently all the time. As you know, in this room, a lot of clips don't get a lot of attention. Usually, they're lost, you need them quickly, and they can shut down projects. But the clip works very well, as you know, with the holding frame. And the objective is to take this filter and to compress it and ensure that there's no bypass. And we all know that bypass is evil. So one of the things we did is we partnered with American Metal Filter because they also reflected high quality in your industry. So we wanted to have this marriage together so that collectively our clips, his frames, he also used us as a consultancy. That then led to the partnership with David. David, we consider one of the universal experts at applications. And throughout the years, I'm not a filter guy, I'm a metal clip guy. But when I had a situation where people were asking me about different types of filters, I would call David because this is what he does. He cut his teeth with this. So that's how that partnership started. But as years went on, we saw that clips and filters and frames, collectively, they were there to keep out this evil thing called bypass. Well, bypass, it really didn't get a lot of attention over the years. But I can tell you that I'm from Connecticut, and there's this thing in Connecticut that happened called Legionnaires. And if you recall, people were dying because mold and this other stuff that was being collected was being passed through the vents. That's really, in that area, at that time frame, that's when people said, wait a minute, something evil like that could pass through a vent and actually kill someone. Well, look, over the years, it lost its attention. Until one day, this other thing showed up. It's called COVID. That opened all of our eyes because this thing here traveled through air. In this room, we have a responsibility not to just filters, but after this pandemic, which still is residually affecting all of us, I looked at what I do, what David does, what Brandon does and said, it's not a filter at all. It's a device. And that device must work all the time. If the filter keeps out the bypass, then evil things will not enter those rooms. And the attention paid to this is unbelievable. I look at it as, in this room, we have a job to do. We're the bouncer with the red velvet rope, and we don't want bypass to get through. And so as long as we can keep bypass away from the efficiency of the unit, as well as the efficiency of these things called the lungs, because collectively, if bypass gets into the unit and affects the efficiency, and if something evil, unfortunately, and or other things that can affect our own system, this is the most important system. So your customers, you have a job to do in here, which is to take these devices, collectively ensure that you not only protect the efficiency of the system, but you protect the efficiency of those people in those buildings. One other tidbit here is my components used to be sold by EFC. I experimented with that with 2 years. That didn't work out well. They're gone. So Springfield Spring Corporation is the manufacturer of these. We will sell these direct as well as engineered installation solutions. But all in all, thank you so much for giving this opportunity. And now off to David. Yes, sir.
You did a fantastic job. You took about 3/4 of my speech out of the way. Now, we could each do 45 minutes on our own, and I think Norm is the fantastic. You summed it up perfectly for us. But I would say too that this is a general session, and so I'm not the only manufacturer of these frames. Norm's not the only manufacturer of these clips, and whoever your current supplier is of these, they most likely have this product line. So this is by no means a commercial for our products, and we appreciate that. Any feedback you guys have on the actual product itself, we'll gladly take into consideration. That's essentially what this is. It's less of a discussion, kind of a show and tell. But next, Dave McKinney, please introduce yourself and tell us how long you've been with NAFA.
Well,
precisely.
I'm a new member, so it's good to be here. Brandon tells me I think I'm the first new member to ever be a speaker, so I'm honored. But these two gentlemen reached out to me because I've talked with Norm. I've known Brandon since we were, almost teenagers, I think, for crying out loud. But I'm with SoCal Filters and Service out in Los Angeles, California, and we're a filter distributor, and we do a lot of filter service. So I go through a lot of clips, and these gentlemen reached out to me to see if I could help out with them and just answer some technical questions, because I spent a lot of time in the field changing filters. And to me, I've always believed this. Your filters are only as good as it's secured in the frame. So, and especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, I'm sure it's the same in every state as it was in mine, that one of the main guidelines is not only to try to do MERV 13 filtration or better, but is to inspect your system and see if there's any bypass or leakage. And one of the first things you can always do is check your clips and make sure your filter's sealed properly. And then my pet peeve in the industry is people who only like to use 2 clips per frame. That thing will oscillate and you'll have bypass. So I guess we're going to have some slides to go through here, and then we'll get to some questions. And there's many ways to combine filters in a frame, and maybe we'll show you something that you haven't seen before today, or we can all share together.
Yeah, absolutely. At first, if you don't mind, how many people have actually purchased, sold, or installed a frame and clip system in the field? Okay, well, that's a good amount.
Can I follow it up with who hates corner clips?
Yeah. Okay, you guys are all really honest, or you guys are all really hungry. So we'll go quickly through this. For those that are not aware of the frames and clips, we'll go give you some details to it. But I'll start with the universal holding frame. It's a 3-inch depth, 16 gauge galvanized steel or 304 stainless steel, all welded construction, and it's meant to last the life of the unit that it's installed into. It could be gasketed or with no gasket, with the expectation of the filter installed would be gasketed. And again, it bypasses the enemy. That's the reason for it. It's used for built-up filter banks, and it allows for multiple filter options. Now, what is a built-up filter bank? It's literally a wall of filtration. And let's first David pointed this out. To the left, you're going to see a very improperly installed air filter. This was not our pictures. I ripped this off from another company's website, so I will not say who they are. But Brandon,
real quick, why is it improper? Because I think we all know the pleats should be vertical, right?
Yes. Well,
That's simple.
there you go. And you can get pretty high with these things. So, I mean, literally, imagine an entire wall of filtration. And you could, from 3 frames up to 30 frames, it all depends what the unit is. And it gets pretty interesting. And the biggest part of the frame is the clip, because just having a filter doesn't mean anything if you don't have the frame that it goes into, right? Well, just having the frame doesn't mean anything either. So you have 2 types of clip attachments. And the first is the Flage-fit clip. Some people call them a knock-on, and those attach right onto the clip, right onto the flange of the frame. And you're most likely to lock it on.
Are your air filtration personnel NAFA certified? Ask if they belong to NAFA and have their certified air filter specialist or NAFA certified technician designations. The CAFS and NCT designations are earned after rigorous exams and demonstrate that the air filtration professional has a high degree of knowledge and professionalism. To learn more about NAFA certifications, visit nafahq.org.
Now, the second is a lance installed or a wire type clip. And this would use the lance informed grooves that are on the universal holding frame. And again, this is universal. So every manufacturer should have something like this to the exact spec. So there's few variances, and there's a few upgraded frames in the industry that you can add to it, but this is the bare bones of it.
Hey, Brandon, can I just shoot something in right here?
Yes.
Particularly with lances, I see this problem a lot is, a lot of times filter banks are a lot taller than this, and it's always good to tell people if they're asking about proper, filter service techniques, this is not a ladder for when you climb up to the top. Because what ends up happening is people step on this, and some of us are heavier than others, and they bend the lances. And then you can no longer properly put that clip in the frame. And the problem with most frames is once they're bent, if you try to bend that lance back, it breaks. So if you climb up on a filter bank, you're going to really make it almost impossible to properly secure the filters in the frame.
Last note here, you see the dimples at the top of each of the frames in the picture. Those are called centering dimples. And these are made to exact size. And Dave will get to the sizes shortly. But essentially, you'd have a nominal filter in there. And what's key when that filter gets installed is that it's centered perfectly within the frame. And that, coupled with the gasket, coupled with the fastener that's sealing it to the frame, that makes it the best chance at not having air bypass. And then we have Norm here. Norm, you can run through. This is the general clips options you have if you want to press that right there.
Yeah, so these are standard clips. I mean, there's a Pete clip, the extension spring clip. I mean, we didn't invent these. These have been out there. We did create a couple clips for a couple different applications because we're engineers as well. But these are pretty much our standard clips. You see this thing way over on the left? That is not a standard clip, bottom left corner. That's what we call a Versa M. Now, these are our wire form clips that we'll use on the lances or the offsets. But in terms of the clips themselves, they're standard clips. But can you go backwards? Yeah. Another one. I just want to so we at times will work with the manufacturers to create solutions. But if you go back, there's that clip we call the Versa M. The header, the 13/16 header, see the bottom left? Well, we were working with Cook Filter, Mr. Chamberlain, and he said, Norm, can you help us develop a clip that we can attach to a header that will protrude out over the face of the filter so that when we pre-filter that, we'll have a flat, 1-to-1 fit. Again, minimal bypass. So we actually invented this thing called the Versa M. So what it does, it clips onto the top of the header, and it's out over the front. The other thing in terms of clips themselves, there's been over the years, I've been doing this for 30 years, there's some real crazy ways people have tried to pre-filter things with wires and hooks and flanges. And when we see those applications, and they're brought to us as manufacturers, we're trying to be solution providers, all of us. So with the V-Bank filters, most of them have pockets in the header, honeycomb pockets. Well, we created with a lot of people in this room a clip that fits into the pocket of the header and protrudes out over the front. So that's one of the clips we developed with people in this room. So in all of our cases, go ahead.
Well, no, I just want to just bring it up to anybody else. So I don't know. I've been through this experience before, but construction projects winding down, and they need those pre-filter clips for that 2-inch pleat to go on that header filter. And all of a sudden, the brass color clip on the top, right? Well, that should hold that pre-filter clip, whether it's a 2-inch or a 4-inch filter. But then anybody run into the problem where, okay, maybe it's an American Air or a Cook, and they both don't use that type of clip. It's not universal to all of them. That's where the clip that Norm's talking about on the bottom left's come in really handy for me, because that's always going to work because it clips onto the header. And if anybody else has ever used the traditional upper left gold clip, if there's 120 of them required for a job, you better ship them 130, because I've never seen any time where you don't have about 10 or so of those break. So it's a good improvement in style of a clip, and you don't have to worry about making sure that you don't have the right one for the specific manufacturer's model. So I've found that to be a useful tip, because nobody ever thinks about clips until they need them, and then it's really a problem when you don't have the right style clip.
And Dave,
well, let me just stop right here, because I like to say in the beginning, once again, we had a lot of hands go up with everybody who hates the corner clip, which is the one on the far left. I like to say it's not about the money, but it's always about the money. So that's why that always gets shipped on the original construction project. But I'm a bigger fan of, in lieu of using that clip, the P-clip for the 1-inch filter or a headered filter, because in my service department, we'll put those in for them whether the customer wants them or not, because it's faster, it's free of charge. It's also something that I've worked a lot with my mechanical contractors on new projects, where even if the air handler was shipped with corner clips, it's a good way to reach out to them, because the most valuable commodity everybody has is time. Okay, it takes a long time to install hundreds of filters with corner clips. It takes significantly less time to use a 1-inch P-clip. So I just throw that one out there. But once again, going back to the whole theme of this is bypass is the enemy. And I think we all have a bigger obligation to make sure that the filters are sealed properly in the event of COVID, is also to make sure that the filter frame bank is sealed as well, too. One way you can go in and test to make sure you're not getting any bypass between the frames is the old flashlight test. You can walk in with a flashlight, and if you're getting light through, then air's going to get through. So maybe you need to come in and reseal this with some Dow 732 sealant or another product. Brandon brought up gasketing. If I were king for a day, no filter frame would ever have gasketing on it again, because gasketing is good for one filter life cycle. So, I always recommend that people put gasketing on the filter so that after it's done, you get new gasketing and you get a proper seal, because otherwise, if you pulled a filter out before, you can see how that neoprene does not come back, and it can actually prevent you from getting a proper seal. And in addition, when you're changing filters, it's also proper to remember to clean the frame before you put the new filter in too, so that you get that proper seal against the flange.
and what's a standard size? You said I put here 24, 24, 12, 20, 24, and 12, 24.
Yeah. Well, when you're being asked if you're ever consulting on a retrofit project, I would try to always stick with those 3 sizes, because then you really are using a universal holding frame. You give the customer the option to use any type of filter they want, as long as space permits, of course. But if we start to vary and going into, say, 2020s or 2025s, then we've eliminated the possibility of using a VMAC. If we stick with those 3 sizes, every model of filter is made in those 3 sizes. So that's, always want to give the customer the option to use whatever filter products are available. I'm personally a big fan of the 4V. So that's why I always try to stick within those sizes, because everybody knows, try to order a 1625 V-bank and let me know if you found one of those, because I haven't found one.
And that's why universal too, because these things, when people ask us what's a recommended filter for these when they call for the frames, there is none. That's specific to the salesman, specific to what the job needs. And so keeping it to a standard size is the most important. It's also the best cost, best lead times. If you're missing some space, you just blank it off, right? Is that what the installer would do?
Well, right. I mean, so if you're going to end up with a 12 by 12 in an upper right or an upper left-hand corner, just put a blank off in there instead of trying to procure a 12 by 12 filter. We always want to make sure that we're not just plugging one brand or whatnot. We want to do our job as consultants and give something that's readily available. It's going to have a standard lead time. It's not some custom order.
All right. And the applications, I noticed here, what's been the main one that you've been seeing, especially since COVID? I mean, is it mostly retrofits that you're coming across, or?
I would just say it's back what we touched on in the beginning, is going out and help everybody inspect their systems. It's always a good chance to look at the cleanliness of their filters anyway, but to make sure the filters are sealed properly, whether we're talking about holding frames or if there's slide tracks, can we put gasketing on the door? Can we make sure that we're sealing that filter in tight? It's another easy one. You open that access panel, that door, It's got dirt all over, probably got bypass. So, and everything we can do to seal it up is we're also doing them not just for COVID and everything else. It's cleaner coils, it's cleaner ductwork, it's just better maintenance for the building. And I said, you can have the greatest filter in the world. You can even throw that HEPA in there, but if it's not sealed in properly, you're not getting the air that you want.
And a quick question, does anybody have any questions now about application or anything? Is it that you guys come across in the field? I know Tony's getting up right now if you need a mic, but any questions?
I'll just comment on with our fun little sample up here with our free cam fill plug. But when you're going to combine two filters in one frame, I know a lot of people who have seen it before who just like to use this 3-inch P-clip to hold both filters in. I'm really against that. I think you should even only get the evil corner clips in there, but it's the only way to do it when you want to put two in one frame is to make sure that you're getting a proper seal on your secondary filter instead of latching all these two in, because if anyone's ever done this where you just only use the 3-inch P-clip to hold both filters, this filter is going to move and you're going to get that bypass around the frame. So when you're combining two filters in a frame, you're still going to need two sets of clips, one to hold the secondary filter and one to hold the pre-filter to do it properly. You can also put two 12-inch filters in one frame as well. So you can lock this one in like this with the corner clip on the inner lance. Then you can install your spring clips like this on the outer lance, and you can actually put them in a reverse mount. You can put the filter right in front. So if you wanted to do carbon and particulate in the same frame, which could also be a nice thing in helping in a design selection because we've eliminated space in the air handler, we dropped the weight of the system and everything. So we can sometimes, unless we're required by code, to have filtration upstream of the fan section and down below. But if we're not required to do that, sometimes we can just have one filter rack and we can have two levels of filtration, saving the system money as well.
And I've put that carbon combo up there just for reference there. And so you have two filters on either side.
Right. It's just also something you could also do in the event of a wildfire too. If they wanted to do something that, as a temporary thing to add carbon to the system, you can just take the existing frame with one filter in it and you could add two filters to one frame, just with the addition of another set of clips.
And I have this one here as the various filter combinations. And there's a lot of dents there, but I think you have the corner clip and the 4-inch box clip shown here as an example.
Yeah, I get calls even sometimes from Norm just saying, well, hey, they got this filter and want to put them in. And so, it's just you got to spend your time to learn what different types of clips are used for different types of filters. So, that filter, that clip's called a C86, would be just connected on the outside lance here as I'm getting louder, and just to hold another pre-filter in front with the corner clips in there. And the C89 would be to use with a 4-inch filter instead of a 2. So, really, there are some pieces of literature out there, but you do have to make sure that you use the right clip for the right filter. Otherwise, you're not going to get that proper seal.
And I think we have here a quick list, clip to the application.
Right. So P-clips are available for everything. Corner clips are going to be are capable of holding a 1-inch filter or a header or a 2-inch deep filter. So like I said, the C86, C89, which is that bottom left, one's for the 2-inch, one's for the 4-inch. Spring clips are used for reverse mounts or box filters. Another key consideration to make sure of, and Brandon, can you help me spin this around? Yep, just spin it around like this, 180 degrees. So we can go all the way. So when installing a 4V in a reverse mount application in the field, it's very important to make sure that when you apply the spring clips that you do not have them on this side coming over this way, because you're going to always want to have these in the vertical configuration. You want the spring clips to come from here in here. If you pull them around from the side, over time, a lot of times, because that spring clip puts 25 pounds of force on it, it will accordion this filter a lot of the time. So it's important to have them on the top and the bottom. We see it happen all the time in the field, and then, it's the proper way to do it. And then if for some reason, like you have your half sizes and you are running these on a horizontal mount, then just reverse the spring clips. The same thing. You want them always on these configuration right here. Pulling them around the side will damage the filter most of the time.
Now, you mentioned corner clips. What's another pet peeve of the installers or things in the field that you've seen that you wish you hadn't?
You have to have a regular style screwdriver with you, because otherwise you're never going to get it in. Because a lot of times people just kind of brace it across and have it on the outer lance when you're supposed to get it back into the inner one. So a lot of times you do have to jockey that filter up to get it in. And as we say at my company, if you're not bleeding, you're not working, because if you don't have gloves on, you will be bleeding. So... but at the same time, it is tedious, but especially when you're using something like a 4V filter, most of the time you're not going to come back and touch that for 12, 18, sometimes 24 months. So go ahead and put it in there right the first time, because what's the point of putting in a nice, expensive, high quality filter if it's not sealed in properly?
Does anybody have any similar experiences or any pet peeves that you guys have? You have the manufacturers here right now to grill if there's any requests for design changes.
I have one. Where's the, everybody needs to make sure they have a little notch for the spring clips on these so that they don't walk around on the filter all the time.
About potential bypass by the gap created by that small difference.
I'm not worried about it at all if you put gasket on the filter. Okay, that's once again, if I could be king for a day where I get rid of gasketing on the filter, because that's a great point that you bring up, because when you go to put it on like I just did today, I take a utility knife and cut the gasket just so that I could knock that on. So once again, that's just going back to, I don't see why any frame's gasketed, because if you really want to do it right, you have to go in there and scrape it off. Whereas if it's on the filter, that's where it's being done right. But, it's, I guess, where we've all been in the filtration industry is they go, why can't we get the OEMs to stop using box filters because 4Vs are so much better? Well, how much success have we had in changing that? So we're never going to get rid of gasketing on the frames either, but that's just one of those things to look out for.
It's also quicker lead time and a better price not having put that gasket on in production. Right. And so that's a recommendation we would like to make. As a manufacturer, it makes it easier to sell. Hopefully, you want a better price and a quicker lead time, we'll ship without gasket.
The other thing to keep in mind, from time to time, we get a lot of calls for stainless steel, all stainless. So if there's environments where it's a coastal or heavy potential degradation, rust, David and I, we work together with manufacturing. All of these clips can be manufactured in all stainless steel. Right now, the wires themselves are a galvanized coated HDMB, they call it spring wire. But we do get calls a lot for all stainless. So the P-clip bracket itself is a half-hard stainless, and then we'll go ahead and make the P or the wire itself out of 302 stainless. So there you go, you have an all stainless clip.
The other thing to remember if you're ever talking to anybody about how to make sure you educate them on how to properly build a built-up filter bank, these can never be welded together. Because when they get welded together, they're going to take that sealant that you put on side, when you put that bead of silicone in, it's just going to melt it right there. The other thing is to make sure that you use the proper size hardware. You really somebody wants to be in frustrating days when they use a screw too long to screw these together that they can't get their filter in. I've seen it happen.
What I've seen is that different manufacturers might be half-inch undersized for nominal, and some might be 3/8, and some might be, so it doesn't sound like a lot, but if we're talking about bypass,
you're absolutely right.
See that issue or not?
I have, and that's another thing where that can just come into, once again, that goes back into gasketing the filter. So if we put gasketing on the filter, this is once again how we solve all these problems, because then we're going to be able to compress and get that proper seal. The frame absolutely does. I mean, I've never had that problem of putting one in there. I can see your situation where you could say, well, okay, maybe we're not getting the proper amount of tension against the flange of the frame. But once again, that's where gasketing comes into play. If you really want to do it right, everything should be gasketed,
Agree. Yeah.
Just like when you're doing your pleats in a slide in, technically if you're doing it right, is you put one in, when you put the second one in, you put a bead of tape around it, right? So that you can slide it in and put it in again so that you're getting no bypass between the filters.
Right. And we were already talking about the slide ins, obviously, with this, but I see it more in that because if you've got 6 in a row, right, you go from a half-inch undersized to 3/8. Well, now it's a half-inch difference on the side. Now, whatever kind of gasketing thing you had to compress may need to be changed.
Or some of those Johnny no-name police manufacturers we had to use during COVID, whose filters were not the right size at all, and they were falling out of everything.
No comment on that.
Dave, that's a good question. Is it a half-inch undercut, 5/8 undercut for the frame to be? What's the ideal perfect fit?
We're talking about the filter because the frame itself is a 24/24.
No, but for the filter frame. So I know for our moisture separator, it's interesting. The pleated filters can have half-inch undercut, quarter-inch undercut, whatever the undercut is. But the moisture separator is always, it's 5/8 undercut.
I'm not going to speak for the manufacturers today because they all have their little quirks to do things differently. But for the most part, a universal holding frame can accept them all.
Okay.
The only concern, once again, is that sealing of it. Okay. We're getting into bypass, and once again, we'll go back to it. Gasketing and proper clips cures all.
One of the other things that we're going to be doing collectively as our partnership is we're going to be putting together a very intense installation videos. So the three of us collectively, we've seen that by being able to provide that to the industry, you'll be able to capture some of these best practices that we can kind of consolidate so that when you have these certain situations, you'll at least be able to see what we consider as a best practice for installation.
One of the other just things I can think of to all my fellow distributors out there, if you're going to stock clips, when you're bringing them in, make sure you clearly mark your stainless steel and your galvanized when they come in, because that magnet test does not work. Okay, because when stainless steel is extruded to make clips, it becomes magnetized again. So, and color is not always going to do it too. So make sure you mark them appropriately. Save you a lot of frustration with some customers over time about, is this galvanized or is this stainless?
I appreciate the time and
Have fun throwing axes.
yeah. And again, Dave McKinney.
Thanks for listening to the Talking Air Filtration Podcast, a production of the National Air Filtration Association. Clean air matters.